Welcome to Area DMG.
We can start. If you guys want to start, are we holding firm to anything more formal? I know, it's my first time at this show. What time with you? Go ahead. Well, the incredible and indomitable Jim Sharpe of the Pin Game Journal, and I know that all of you folks probably subscribe to the Pin Game Journal. If you don't, please do. It's been going around for over 2 decades, and Jim does a spectacular job in covering the entire business of pinball, the hobby, the enthusiasts, features, and all the rest of it. And I guess as a lead-in, because this is Jim's fireside, Jim has some visuals and things that he wants to share. Do you guys want to see stuff? Sure. Or is that one frightening picture enough? Or we should just move on? So Jim, please.
Oh, well, all right.
Or if you're not ready.
No. Well, I really love drunk history.
Okay.
That's what I'm here for.
Does anybody want to watch Drunk History?
Does anyone know what I'm talking about, though?
Oh, yes.
Well, have we all seen it?
Has everybody seen Drunk History?
I've not seen it.
No, not this show in general, but the one that relates to this topic.
I have not seen it.
All right, get ready.
I've heard, ma'am? Excuse me. Her.
Young man.
Yes.
Young man.
Yeah. We'll be getting a haircut this afternoon. This is a really stupid thing.
All right, so let me add in before Jim starts it. So I'm coming back from a business trip. Hopefully some of you are familiar with my sons, Josh and Zach. So I get a call from Zachary saying, and I forget whatever it was. It was like Tuesday night in Comedy Central. I live in the Chicagoland area, it's Channel 47. And he said, on 7:30, need you to DVR this. Okay. So I go and set it up, and I look, and has everybody watched Drunk History or familiar with it? Okay. I didn't know it from a hole in the wall.
Not them.
No.
I
Well,
know
but I will explain something because it was totally out of the blue for me. Number one, that when I looked, the segments were Milton Bradley, Roger Sharpe, Bobby Fischer. Roger Sharpe, and Ellen and I caught it live. I mean, I happened to be home from work and whatever else, and we put it on. Topher Grace is playing Milton Bradley because they do actors, and then they do voices that they dub in or whatever, and did the history of Milton Bradley, and basically that was Hasbro. That's what it's become. And I thought, God, this is great. They get to my segment, which you guys will see, and I'm sitting and watching, and I don't want to spoil it, but there's a part in the middle of it where this person has some difficulty, and I just turned to Ellen and I said, I think they're actually drunk. And then watched the Bobby Fischer one against Boris Spassky, which I remembered watching when they had televised, if you can believe, on PBS back in '72, a live world championship for chess. And Shelby Lyman, guy, you remember the name, was putting little pieces of cardboard up to show they were talking about. And I play chess, and I used to be pretty good. I never know he's doing this maneuver. And it's from 1873, and it was developed by, and it's like, wow. So there's this whole thing rather than just the way I played it, which was just however. So, all things being equal, we watched that segment. I didn't realize the show had won 3 Emmys. And it had been on for like, obviously, at least 3 years. Did not realize the outpouring of people who actually watched the show. And subsequently, so many times where people had asked, was I aware of what had they contacted me? And I said, I didn't have a clue. Had never contacted me. There was another segment on Mysteries of the Museum, which I think is on the History Channel, where they did contact me and things didn't work out scheduling-wise. But that's my preface for Drunk History, which was not knowing anything at all about the show, about the segment, and now living with this as one of my great accomplishments. So So here we go.
And,
Yes.
I mean, and you've said that basically it's correct. It's not like,
Kind of.
I mean, the game is wrong game and.
Right,
and
they
it's-
took some liberties
Yeah,
with some of
but
the
the
stuff.
actual facts,
The actual facts, they got pretty much on target.
which I was shocked.
Yeah, no, I understand, but some of the acting by the Roger Sharpe character was like, hey, yeah, this, no. But, and the other part, within the pinball community, a lot of the guys actually know some of the actors and stuff, and what I will say is that one of the people, and you'll know who I'm talking about, got really, really sick, and almost had some complications and issues. So again, my comment to Ellen was, I think they're really drunk. Yes, they really do drink, and they really are doing things, so don't ever. I'm looking at you.
It's like,
I am not gonna be drunk.
Tell me that answer. All right, so here we go, without further ado. Can everybody hear?
Sorry about the sound.
We're not gonna ball around, it's a game. We're gonna ban it. Why pinball? Because pinball is a game of chance. It's a f***ing game, dude. Yeah. So the New York police start raiding restaurants. They're like, oh, you got a pinball machine here, so it's okay if we f*** it up.
Oh, sorry about that.
And then push them into the house. A lot of smaller cities around America would follow what New York did. So all around America, yeah, they might really well. Cut to decades later, in the early 70s, there's this guy, Roger Sharpe. Roger Sharpe. He was in his off time. But he has to do it, like, under the radar, because pinball is still illegal. So Roger Sharpe, he's one of the best in the world. It's like, hey, I'm good at this. I know how to make this pinball move. And it's not a chance, it's not a gamble. So, in the midst,
That's what I do.
In the midst of all this, the American Music and Amusement Association, which is kind of like the pinball manufacturers of America, was like, all right, look, pinball is declared illegal, right? That's crazy. That's crazy. We have to do something. We have to save our industry. Cheese. The American Music and Music Association called Roger Sharpe and they're like, hey, we're here. You got it on the side. And he goes, okay, I gotta do what I gotta do. So they bring Roger Sharpe in front of the New York City Council to try to get pinball legalized. When the news media is there, it's a big deal. It's 1976. But name's, Roger Sharpe was a bank shot machine. He plays it for a few minutes, and he's like mastering it, right? He's, batting the ball around. Still, nobody's impressed, like, whatever. He looks at everybody in the city council, and no straight out of Babe Ruth's book. He goes, listen up, I'm going to call the shot. Super Bowl, I'm going to pull this punter back a certain distance. I'm going to launch the ball, and that ball is going to go into that center slot. Everyone's like, yeah, whatever. So the pressure is on this dude's shoulders. He pulls back the plunger, chips it up, lets it go, and the pinball goes up the playfield and lands right in that middle slot where he said it was going to go. Right at that moment, where the councilman just grabbed his gavel, smacked it, he smacks, and he goes, pinball is now legal. Across America, all the cities who just kowtowed to whatever New York did were like, yeah, okay, pinball is legal, blah, 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 blah. To that one call shot. This is not a guy that's regulated to the England's of history. To show off his skills in order to save an entire industry, which he did. This is sad. Right. I'm going to shoot it from here to the middle, right? Wow,
Thank you, Jim.
Sure.
So that was the drunk history segment. Thank you. All right.
Do you want to see pictures? Do you want to just talk? Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to show pictures when I look really young and handsome and wonderful. If you have a couple, did you guys want to see a few pictures of Jimmy's taken?
I want to see the shot picture.
Huh?
The shot picture. That's what I want to see.
The shot picture.
I don't have, I actually don't.
Can I ask you a question related to that?
Absolutely.
I mean, obviously because of this and because of pinball lore, you are credited as being the man who saved pinball.
My sons actually have a T-shirt that a friend of theirs made. And maybe you've seen Zachary or Josh in tournaments wearing. Yeah.
So question one, do you believe that's accurate? And question two is, does that bother you, or is it a burden? Has it been a burden?
All right, so the answer to question one, I was very young, at least a heck of a lot younger than I am now. That's the shirt. I don't think that I ever really appreciated or understood the significance of what I did. And more importantly, understand, all right, for a period of decades, Los Angeles didn't allow pinball from 1941 until 1972. Chicago, manufacturers, thousands of people that were employed, no pinball. New York, obviously, 41 and 76. I actually testified in a court case in Ohio when the Assistant Attorney General, Valley, brought me in to testify and talk about skill and whatever else around the same time. Mesquite, Texas, there were a couple of other places randomly around the country where whatever. And, I think because it was New York, as I said, 1972, Los Angeles had already opened. So you still have two dominant metropolitan areas with significant number of people living within those areas that didn't have access to pinball machines. I think that because it was New York, because it was as significant as it ultimately turned out to be in terms of what I was able to accomplish, I think that that had a domino effect, because Chicago legalized later that same year. I think because of that, and because it was as newsworthy as it was, and trust me, I mean, there were cameras everywhere in the courtroom. It was covered by the media. both on national level and obviously on a local level. So, so yes. To answer the second question, do I think it's a burden? No, I mean, I'm appreciative of the opportunity that I had in terms of the role that I've had with pinball over the years. And I'll back up for a second. Because I think that in life sometimes things happen serendipitously. We may have goals and objectives and dreams as what we want to do or whatever else. Be a brain surgeon, astronaut, Major League Baseball player, whatever it might be. I grew up in Chicago, which meant I didn't play pinball. Didn't know anything about it. I had an older sister who went to the University of Illinois, and on certain weekends during the course of the semester, it was Mom's Day weekend or Dad's Day weekend, and we'd go out to have lunch or whatever else, and there'd be a pinball machine. And for those who have seen my book or read my book or whatever else, the section in the beginning talking about a young boy standing on an orange crate is absolutely true. I was probably like 6 or 7. What's not true is it wasn't a pinball machine, it was a baseball game with a man running it. And we were out in California, and I don't have to go into details, but there was an area with pinball machines, and those were just overwhelming to me. Baseball game was understandable. You press this button, and hit this, that, and whatever else. So my familiarity with pinball didn't start until I went to college. And then suddenly it became something that was, how do I call it, more obsessively compulsive in regard to playing. I was absolutely horrendous. Because to me this was a new thing. And put your money in, pull back the plunger, and start flipping. Okay, ball's still up here somewhere. I'm just flipping, madly. And then there are certain moments of epiphany where it's like, oh, I can wait. And the game was hurdy-gurdy Central Park. If anybody goes to IPDB or whatever else, no doubt we're doing. And in Wisconsin, everything was at a ball back then. Realized that if the ball was going down on the left side, I only had to flip handle with one hand, not the other. And, started getting more comfortable. The turning point for me, and there's a reason for kind of sharing this story, and if you've heard it before, my apologies, and if you haven't, hopefully it's somewhat interesting. The turning point for me, and I've talked about this in the past, so my apologies if you've heard it before, was watching a fraternity brother. The game was hot poker at a burger joint in Madison, Wisconsin. Hamburger, French fries, soda, and a cigarette. He was having lunch and playing the game, and I saw somebody cradle the ball for the first time. Now, back in that era, you're talking about small flippers as a roto target in the middle, and he's banging it up to 10 balls. It goes down to 8, goes down to 10, and he was having his lunch, and I'm just watching. Because I had never seen anything like that before. And I was like, wow. And it got to the point where he needed to go to class, and he turned to me, and he said, here, why don't you finish the game? And I joked that I drained all 10 balls before he left. If you know Madison, Wisconsin, and the university, there's Bascom Hill. And I know that he was somewhere on the hill. I'm going to give myself at least 5 minutes, maybe, before I totally drained. But it gave me a sense that, wow, I mean, you can control this. And I remember a significant achievement for me, and it may not sound so much for you guys, was rolling hurdy-gurdy. And I was like, damn, I mean, I can do this. And I just felt like one with the game. Okay, grow up pinball ignorant, have this incredible opportunity during my matriculation in college, only after you've done homework and stuff, playing, and it is just, I mean, it's great. And there's an affinity that I had with the games. I moved to New York, no pinball. My career was such that I had an opportunity as the managing editor of GQ, at the time I was associate editor, to assign myself a story. Very simply, I wanted to do a piece on pinball so I could find a way to buy a pinball machine. purely selfish and self-centered. I found a couple of places in the village where some games were there, but again, illegally. One of the games that had a significant influence on me was free fall sky jump. So if you know sharpshooter, there's some specific areas that you may see some familiarity with. And I went to the library on 42nd and 5th Avenue to do research, and went into the stacks and pinball, flippers, tilt. I couldn't find anything. The only thing I saw was a piece that had appeared, I think it was in Esquire or maybe Playboy. Don't remember. Anthony Lucas, who had won a Pulitzer as a first serious writer, had done a piece in 1972. The featured game was Fireball, because that was the current one. Playboy? Thank you. And I went back to the editor, and my comment to him was it was going to take a little bit more time for me to pull this together. He said, "What do you think you know so much? Why don't you write a book?" Which ultimately wound up happening. But I think that the purpose for the story in the background is that, and again, whether or not I see it as a hardship or something that is kind of, maybe I'm not as proud of, I forget the term that you wanted to use in the question, was that I had a different appreciation for it. When I had a chance to do the book, I had a chance to meet many of the most memorable people in the industry, who I found fascinatingly so were old enough to either be my father or grandfather, and here we were talking about pinball machines and what they were doing in the 1930s and 1940s. So Harry Williams, the late Steve Kordak, the late Harry Williams as well, Sam Ginsberg, Samster, Gary's dad, and the list goes on and on and on and on, and really being able to relive that experience and get a sense of it. So there was a sense for me of purity to what pinball was all about, and I think that, thank you. God, who's the handsome guy on the left side? Yeah, they actually look pretty damn good there. Steve Kordak is the fellow on the right, who's truly a legend in the industry, a career that spanned 8 decades, if you really count them up from the 30s, 40s on through to the thousands. A designer of note, somebody who was able to, and this is really interesting to me, no matter where the technology was, and understand starting in the 30s, you know, basically just mechanical units, with a lot of inventions and advancements, but he was there, you know, from mechanical to electromechanical to solid state. I mean, all the way through, and still sharp as a cracker. And if any of you have sat in on any of the talks that Steve Ritchie and others have probably given, I know that they give a lot of notable accolades to Steve and his input, his guidance, and just being an inspiration. And not just for age and everything else, but really having a sense of the overall geometry and whatever else. So, with all that being said, I don't think that it's been a burden. I think that I never anticipated my life to be pinball-centric, if you will, and different goals and aspirations. I didn't think that my legacy would be such that my boys are as deeply involved in it as they are, not only as incredible players, but getting me to resurrect the IFPA. So, you know, somehow they followed in, I won't say my footsteps, but, you know, in the shadows of what I was able to do. And I think more importantly, because I see the span of ages, there are the guys. I see the span of ages and the people who really have a chance to enjoy pinball and the beauty of what it is, and the tactile, totally immersive experience. And for me, there's a sense of, yeah, I mean, I helped that. You know, thank God that I was able to, because otherwise, I don't know where it would have gone or how it would have been, and maybe it still would have been in the back rooms or the shadows. So, sorry for the lengthy answer to it, and a little bit of a preamble, but hopefully it gives a bit of a context. I've said this, and I honestly, absolutely believe it. If I had grown up in a city where pinball's around, I would have been it. Okay. But the fact that it wasn't, and the fact that I came to it when I did, and had the opportunities to do what I've been able to do, whether it's been game design and everything else, you know, I am humbled and grateful for everything, as well as there they are. And I'm beginning to look older on the right, I don't know. So yes. Anything else I can bore you guys with? I have no fixed agenda, either today or tomorrow, for anybody who actually has the appetite to sit through and listen to me yet again.
So you're,
Sharpshooter.
when I showed your wife that picture, she said, I don't know if her hand's a little high. A little high up there.
I've always said that Ellen's hand, Ellen is the one on my right leg, and her hand is a little bit higher up on my thigh. The woman on my left leg, on the right side, is Marilyn, who was the wife of the president of Game Plan. So yes. And then in the back, kind of a shout out to my friend Steve Epstein. So you have Z's Cafe, and then there's other folks within the context of things there. Yeah, you have another question.
Yeah, you've been involved in, there's a large debate these days about can a game that is not a licensed property survive, make it in the market?
Right.
You've been involved in licensing for a long time and with a lot of different people. Can you give us an overview about what you see the issues of acquiring a license and how a license makes a difference,
Sure.
if in fact it really does?
Okay, fair question. So I was living on the East Coast, and again, for those who know it, I have designed games for Williams. Stingray is mine with Stern, and Barracora and for Williams, and I had some others that never saw the light of day with Gottlieb way back when, and others. But when I started, wow, yeah, God, there's a story behind that that was a sad one. Yeah. Anyway, when I got the call, and we were living in Connecticut, to come to work at Williams, I had approached them in 1987 with a couple of different things. One was another game design. Another was I wanted to launch a consumer pinball magazine, because I already been in magazines and had taken over the editorship of, Jesus, that's my old office. That is one of my favorite pictures, truthfully. So thank you. Yeah, I love that picture. Another was I wanted to do a consumer magazine, and I wanted Williams to place the first premier issue in all of the machines, so that people would get that for free, and then they could do whatever. The last was, and it was the first time I'd gone to a licensing show in 1987, was I looked around, not knowing that business or industry at all, and I saw a couple of themes. One was a movie that was going to come out called Willow, which some may or may not remember that time. Just so it's a little bit hard-edged. The other was Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And I said, wow, that's kind of interesting, but it's Disney, and I just don't know. The other, I met a couple of young guys who had started up in the Northeast with a black and white comic book, and they were just getting represented for the first time, and they had created what I thought was kind of intriguing, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Eastman and Larry. And I met with them, and I remember asking Williams, any interest? No. And it was probably too early. I was too far ahead of the curve. But I thought maybe there was something there, because I remember back in the day, back in the mid to late 70s, Tom Neiman, who really was a breakthrough in terms of Bally. Not only the time of the switch over from electromechanical to solid state, but more importantly, licensed games. Wizard, Captain Fantastic, the ill-fated Dolly Parton, because the game design sucked. I mean, Rolling Stones, I mean, the list goes on and on in terms of what they wanted to do. The Harlem Globetrotters, I was up before. Nobody else had really done anything. And they really kind of staked out a claim, where they were week number 3 tied with Chicago Coin, probably, with Gottlieb being the premier company, Williams second, and down over here was Bally. It didn't really have a good track record when it came to mechanics, although Greg and Jim had just started as designers, Greg Kennett and Jim Capper. So I thought, wouldn't it be interesting? I was hired to become the director of marketing back in March March of 1988, and went in and had some discussions where I said, wouldn't it be nice to do license games? Do one in the spring, one in the summer, one in the fall, one in the winter. Just kind of, dabble, because Valley got into a point where a lot of the games, each one was a license. And the first, actually, and we talked about Batman before, I actually went after that. And tracked down, because I didn't know how to do anything. And I'd seen some little clip somewhere or something else and was sent. I remember going up for a meeting in Minnesota to meet with some advertising and marketing agency to just find out, no, you have to talk to Warner Brothers. Okay, so I contacted Warner Brothers. And the problem with that, and the reason we didn't do it, the police force, for those who know, was supposed to be that game. I believe that the only value of the license, because we didn't advertise to consumers, our advertising with the trades, was I need to be part of promotions. Consumer sweepstakes, whatever else. I want to be on name tags and products. Whatever it might be. Barcodes, and if you collect the right ones, you get a game. Something that would give us more of a presence and an awareness. I could do that, but I couldn't show Jack Nicholson or Michael Keaton on that place. I can do the cartoon. Okay. I can show them from the back. Well, that's great. I'll see their butts. On the back glass, that's kind of face forward for us. It's going to catch everybody's eye. So we turned it down because it was mandatory for me to say if I'm going to do a license, I have to have something that gives me more. Elvira was an opportunity to do something more. And Cassandra we were working with her was incredible. And the trade show, when we launched it, we stopped before in its tracks. And it was a massive success. Now, fast forward, and I've worked on literally hundreds of licenses. Pinball, video, and a range of other things. I never wanted to do every game being a license. I always thought that there was room to have a medieval madness. Nothing wrong with that, it's act for months. And the games kind of go on and on and on. If it made sense, if I could get the things that I wanted, which meant I needed talent, so approval rights and everything else, we didn't have to worry back then in terms of footage. I wanted speech calls. So if I can get John Rice Davies to come in the studio in Chicago to do speech calls for Ian Jones, like if I can get Bob Denver to come in and do a photo shoot for the brochure as well as do speech calls, right? And then getting some residuals in regards to wherever they're appearing, whatever they're doing, so they get to at least heighten the awareness of what we were doing. As not only a company, but more importantly as an industry in total. I think that the challenge today is that there is a reliance, principally from Stern, on the fact that the only games that will ever sell are licensed things. My attitude, very simply, is if people define pinball by a license and not just by it being pinball, we have a more serious issue in going forward. Pinball's pinball. And truly, look, you cannot make a bad game good with a license. I don't care what the license is, and we won't talk about the more recent Star Wars. And taking nothing away from Steve and what he tried to do, but let's face it, that game did not achieve what I think everybody's expectation was. You can't take a theme, and I'm going to go back in time when George Gomez does Playboy, and assume that that's going to find its way into a home. I'm sorry, it's just the wrong thing. So you have to understand, number one, who your audience is. Number two, theme-wise, does it make sense? Or are you going to offend some people or turn off a marketplace? And I think from the standpoint of Stern, for a period of 10 years, after we dropped out in 1999, the feeling was that pinball needed something because nobody cared about pinball anymore, which I think is totally wrong. You can make a good game better, and if all the ingredients are right, Batter's Family, Twilight's, and T2, the list goes on and on. then yeah, then a license really does help. If you have something that people really like. You know, I have concerns about how many more rock bands we're going to resurrect from 23 because, no, and seriously, their philosophy right now is that one game per year is going to be a rock band. Okay. Iron Maiden, I wasn't necessarily a fan way back when, but if the game is solid enough, and Keith, I think, did a great job in modifying Archer, for those who didn't have a chance to play Archer. I played more Archer than I played Iron Maiden, but I think that works. In the scheme of things, I think the biggest breakthrough, and look, I've been licensing admittedly for Jersey Jack, for those who may or may not know, Hobbit, Pirates of the Caribbean, and there's a couple of others that are coming. I think that Pat was able to kind of break the mold. Whether you like dialed in or not. And I remember telling Jack, he said, no, we're going to go for something different. We're not going to do a license game. You're wrong. You're doing a license game, and he looked at it. And I said, for the community? That's a Pat Waller license. Hello. And what did Steve Ritchie reveal at Pinball Expo last year? My next game is going to be an original game. If Pat wasn't successful, maybe Steve would not have wanted, and there's ego and vanity involved, let's face it, almost any field, but especially in this one. So I think that it'll be interesting to see how Steve's game does, whether it's motorcycle-based or car chases or anything else that his life tends to revolve around. We'll wait and see with great anticipation. Houdini is not a license, although maybe it is seen as one. Total Nuclear Annihilation is not a license, and yet Scott has gotten some incredible kudos for what he has done. And I think that there is room, truthfully, for games that are original themes if the balance of what it is that's being created works. If you're trying to force feed, and it's interesting, I think the success rate at Williams Valley was probably somewhere around 95, 96%. Forget about Popeye. Forget about Flintstones. Forget about some other games where we didn't hit the mark. Forget about the fact that The Shadow was a bad movie, but a great game. So is there value added? If there's value added to it and it gets your attention and it draws you to it, then that's great. But I don't think that it's necessitated by it needing to be a license to make you stop, potentially. Now, I'm talking to a group of people who are here because in some way, shape, or form, you love pinball. But to people in the outside world, maybe they need a brand, if you will, to draw their attention. So again, for me personally, and it runs totally counter to what a large majority of my career has been, I've always wanted to do less. And allow the experience of everybody's imagination and creativity. There's a couple of things that could be said about a license. Number one, I have a storyline. I already have what the components are. Okay, so let me mix, match, and put it together. And if I'm going to do a color-coded so that Aerosmith is the same as Kiss, is the same as whatever, and I'm going to go for the blues versus the reds versus the oranges, then that works for John Moore. All right, and I'm going to bring the group back together again. Monster Bash. Taking the classic monsters, we're going to turn them into a rock band. Okay, so you have a built-in storyline. In the case of the latter, we're creating something totally from scratch. It could have been generic creatures, if you will. But the creativity and imagination was such of like, all right, what are we going to do with this? Or in the case of something like Gilligan's Island, with the guys, and then back in the old office, I had an office in the front, and we're talking about 3401 North California in Chicago, the old Williams plant. That office, there was a hallway that led down to the back, which is where pinball and video was. For a period of days, when they came in the morning, it was led by Greg Ferris and others. I would just hear, in the morning, lunchtime, at the end of the day, and a very ingenious game designer who was never full-time at Valley, Dan Langlois, who passed away. Known for doing Radical, for anybody who's ever seen it. Very creative, very imaginative. Had come up with a concept. Not a great one, but for those who are familiar with Gilligan or check the Internet Pinball database, he had that circular jungle, as we call it. Roger, you gotta get Gilligan's on. We have this feature, and this feature is it just fits. So when you have that kind of passion, okay, let me see if I can make your dream realized. Versus, guess what your next project is? And it's like, huh, really? And I'm up there, go. Go, I need it in 9 months, go. I mean, there has to be an affinity for whatever it is, whether it's original or anything else. So I hope that answers the question without totally killing it along the way. Oh, no.
I haven't heard this story.
All right.
I
didn't supply him with pictures.
I took the picture, but
Yours is different. Yours is more recent. All right. For those who don't know who that is, that's Josh in about 30 years. Just saying. All right. So, yeah. So Jim captured me on this one. We figured out, looking at it earlier, that it's 2003.
because there's T3s back there.
Right. So, there's a story. I've had facial hair for the majority of my adult life. Well, beards, in fact. Large mustaches, as we saw. For 32 years, I had at least a mustache. In 2003, and my folks are still alive, my mother specifically, I was down in Florida. And my mother had always, look, when I was in college, I'd grow something and then winter vacation, Thanksgiving, take it off. Grow it again, oh, it's semester break, take it off, so I didn't get grief. So, anyway, despite all of her pleas over the decades, it was like, screw that, I'm going to keep my mustache. Well, it got to a point, 32 years, so 2003, so my last time that I had been clean shaven was in 1971, when I was only 6, so it was very difficult. So I was down in Florida, and I had made a decision. And again, my mom was still somewhat there, but I called it a week. They had retired and had a house in Florida, and I was down visiting. And I guess my dad was, my stepdad was no longer alive, but my mom was there, and we had a caregiver with her. And I said, come on. What? Let's go. And I went into the front bathroom. And I had my mom sitting down in the toilet seat. Took out a scissor. Sat kind of in shoes. And she was laughing her ass off. Excuse me. And I take off my mustache and it's like, oh my God. I mean, the memory even now almost brings me to tears, but it was worth its weight in gold. I'd always feared, because people, if anybody ever asked, 32 years, it was like, can I ever grow it back? Would it ever be what it is? I mean, you become somewhat attached to it. But just the joy in those couple of moments and everything else. Now, the interesting part, we didn't discuss this other than the date. So, so I have it off. I'm down in Florida because I don't know what it's going to look like. So, the sun has to be out. I need a tan, otherwise there's going to be like white over here. This is like, this is a frightening thing here. I'm going to the pool. I'll be back in like 10 days, Mom. I did not tell Ellen or the boys. Ellen comes to pick me up at the airport in Chicago. I am standing outside.
She misses you.
She didn't recognize you.
Now, I still have a flip phone, but it was even before flip phones or whatever else. It's not like I'm calling. Okay. Anyway, if you've ever been to O'Hare, it's kind of a lounge. Okay. Pull around, I step outside, like, and the look on her face was like, oh my God, she had never seen me without a mustache. And even a beard for the majority of the time that we were together, and beer for a very long time. The boys just kind of laughed their asses off because I had told them from time to time over the years, yeah, next time I go down there to visit Nana, I'm going to take it off. Come down. Ah, okay. Ah, oh. So the one time I never said anything, I suppose everybody, and Jim was around to capture that moment.
That was at the industry, at AMOA.
Yeah, which was really strange to me.
How did
because-
that, all the people that knew you?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, the expectation for me was that nobody would, I mean, like Ellen, they would just go, a lot of people just didn't comment. It was like, oh, okay, he's never had a mustache. And others did. And it's like, oh, wow, you took it off. But there were others who just, I mean, I'm standing with them close and we're having a conversation and it's like, okay, nothing. So anyway, there you go.
So you did, the couple reactions you did get from family kind of made it worthwhile.
Oh, it was
just to
priceless.
see how it worked.
Right, and the picture that you have,
Yeah.
because I told Ellen, I checked, the last time I took off my mustache was in 2015, and I am considering maybe before the end of the year to do it. The fellow on my right is Steve Epstein, a very, very dear friend, who was the owner and operator of the world famous Broadway arcade in New York City, 52nd Broadway, who was gracious enough. When I came back, all right, so Papa was created, if anybody cares. Do you care?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. Well, we have one in the audience, but yes. So I went out for a Bally Super Shooter. I was involved with that. And Bally had run a national tournament. And this is in 1977. And I was actually one of the co-moderators, if you will, and whatever else.
It gave away like a car.
The person who won was Ken Lunsford out of Plains, Georgia, which happened to be the home of the president at the time. He won a Datsun 280Z. He won a Pioneer electronics package. It's a pinball tournament. It was staged at the Playboy Towers in Chicago. There was a ballroom that was incredible. Set up, lit floor. There was like an overhang around this banquet hall or whatever, this meeting hall, where camera crews were set up. I mean, this was like national news. There was 1 million players who attended the play. It was held at all the Aladdin's castles, which back then was kind of like the McDonald's of arcades. The age range, so large tournament, top 20 players from regional or whatever else all converged to Chicago for the championship. The range in age, and again, this is 1977, I'm talking 40 years ago, 32 to 11. And I know we talked about Escher and some of the others. These are the top 20 players in the country. There was one gal. There was no discrimination in terms of whatever, and obviously no junior thing. And the fellow that wound up winning, and it was a time, Bally had an ulterior motive for all of this, which was the unveiling of Playboy, the pinball machine. And I remember Paul Ferris coming in, and the back glass was still really kind of wet for the camera crews and whatever else. The games were blackjack, power play, 8-ball, and I forget what the other one was, but I helped set up the bank. It was 4 and 4, and how they played and whatever else. Anyway, Ken Lunsford was the winner. Joe Grillo should have won. Ken Lunsford made one shot. It was a three-game series for the two of them, and he made the one shot of the 8-ball to get 5X. And they did it based on total points, which I thought, well, but Joe won the first 2 games. Ken only won the last game. So I went back, and at that point in time, I used to hang out a lot at Broadway Arcade. I was living in New York City. I would stop there in the morning, I'd come over from work at lunch, and after work I would be there and we would play. And a lot of the tournaments and things today, whether it's called Zen Pinball or whatever else, were things that Steve and I started just because he's counting change and it's like, all right, we're going to play the ball. You're not ready yet? All right, one ball here. I'm down on game number 8, catch up, and whatever, and we would play until 1 or 2 in the morning. So that stuck with me. There's got to be something, some way to kind of balance stuff. So that what I saw as an inequity, and not taking anything away from Ken and his performance that weekend, was Joe had played significantly better, more consistently for that entire weekend. I tend to be somewhat anal in terms of how I do things. Everything written down by hand. I tried to get a couple of other people involved. I knew that Steve and I would play, but I needed more. And I wanted to get 4 players. I was only able to encourage, and unfortunately, parted 2 years ago, a film editor, Lionel Martinez, who was one of the regulars, to play. And we played. And I took down scores. I want to say probably between 10 and 12,000 games is what we played over a period of about 3 years. And I handcrafted everything. And I tried to come up with a scoring system. Because what I envisioned was like a handicapping level. All right, so you have a 32 handicap and you have a 48. Well, somehow that mitigates and you're kind of like on an even playing field. There's got to be some way to do this. I wanted to devise, and I am into acronyms, PEPGA. Not an ERA, PEPGA. Point efficiency per game average. Not bad. PAPA, Professional and Amateur Pinball Association. MES International, because I am somewhat humble, and then that sound like that I am. It was Martinez, Epstein, and Sharpe. Could have done the letters any other way, but I knew I needed to have Lionel up front, because Lionel was always going to be happy. He really, really was. And I used to argue that, he's a better player. I said, I'm more consistent. I'm better. Steve would get the higher highs from time to time, but the disparity in terms of his performance was somehow. And worked out the scoring system, which some people still use today. I know that the IFPA just did for the World Championship of 7-5, 3-1. In a 3-game series, and I always wanted it to be a situation where you still had a chance. Even going into game 3, depending on how the points were scored. So that you kind of like be there. And the 5s, hopefully if you have 5, that's 15. So if you won 2, that's 14. He comes in third. The 4th, then it's 1, it's 15 and 15. I didn't want anybody to ever feel shut out. And we made some accommodations, and I know that some of you are aware of the 4-2, 1 and 0, and all the others. But mathematically, it tended to work that way. And Papa was started, ran a couple of pilot programs, if you will, where I was able to get some other folks to come in. And it's like, we're going to play a 3-game series. Don't worry about it. Just take down the scores. Let me work and see. Did it work? Was it the right way? And there was a fellow, it was in Pine Brook, New Jersey, Gametown, Ron Colucci, where we staged the first league. Talked to this guy. Sunday mornings, what do you think? And it was a reconverted church. And they set up a game room. And wow. Yeah, that's, I got an award. Papa, oh, thank you for that. Yeah. Lou Reed gave it to me, an old pinball buddy. Anyway, so I was like, sure. Steve and I was living in Connecticut at the time. Steve was in New Jersey. And both of us trucked in to be there at the beginning and brought donuts and whatever else. And we got some people signed up to run the thing, just to see did they understand it, were they enjoying it. And then obviously with the Broadway Arcade, to begin doing leagues there. And the whole purpose was, if we can do leagues, then we can lead it into a tournament. So there's some end objective. So that's how Papa was started and created in the scoring system.
Was this a pop-up?
That was a Papa event, I think that
In New
was
York?
in New York, the second annual Papa.
Right.
I think that was at the Omni Hotel at that time. And yeah, they gave me a lifetime achievement.
Yeah, I was there, I took it, but I can't remember.
No, I understand. So anyway, so that was the start of Papa, and then Josh, well, I was involved with the creation of IFPA, funded by the manufacturers, really done on behalf of operators in Wisconsin, in Indiana, in Ohio, wow, That's awesome. Thank you. Because they needed to hold on to their locations. They had locations locked in on contracts for darts and pool, and they thought if they could get pinball, that would only solidify things. And did not really go that
Where are
well.
these kids now?
Where are they now? Well, the fellow in the Bears jacket is now the director of marketing at Stern. That's Zachary. And the small child on the right, wearing the Papa sweatshirt, is the CFO of the world's leading video game company, Raw Thrills. Zachary, who's ranked very high, will see his rankings drop precipitously because his wife is going to give birth in August. So all the events that he's been able to travel to, because Josh has always said, I can't get around anymore because I have children. So he just dropped into the teens or whatever else.
So,
Yeah.
maybe some kind of new ranking system handicap.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, kids.
Yeah. But Josh approached me 11 years ago and asked if I could resurrect IPA because Steve Epstein had sold off, unbeknownst to me, the rights to talk. So Kevin Martin had been in Pittsburgh and was running Pittsburgh and whatever else. So I approached the industry folks and got the rights to IPA. The rest, as they say, is history and the insanity of people worrying about Whopper points, World Pinball Player rankings, and all the rest of it, and IPA, obviously, the International Pinball Association. Originally, it was going to be the IPA. And I said, no, can't be. Huh? The International Pinball. I said, if you go to Europe, they're flipper games. Gotta put flipper in. Pure and simple. Which is contrary to what I mean Papa did. Papa just sounded right, so I didn't worry about having it be flipper in there anyway, shape or form. So that's that. Any other questions or stories or?
Speaking of licensing, how often did you guys get approached from your European distributor saying, do this license, even though we know it's not as well known in America? Or was America always the driving licensing venue?
The driving one. I mean, the person who was really responsible for a lot of the growth of Valley back in the 70s and early 80s was Hans Rosenzweig from Nova Operato. Germany had always been, and still is, a major and significant part of it. If Hans didn't like something, well, maybe I'm not going to buy 6 containers. Maybe I'm only going to buy 3. So you're going to see a lot of games from that era that have conventional volumes. I will tell you right now that many of those games, because I had the privilege and opportunity to see them in whitewoods and purple designs, have different volumes. And things comparable if you play Viking or if you play Flip Flop, you know, with the Bounce Back or Centaur, some of those others that kind of, you know, got under the radar. But by and large, you always want an Italian bottom. What's an Italian bottom? Turn rings down the foot. I don't like this. It has to be this. If you don't do this, maybe I'll take 1 container. Well, when you have that kind of power and influence and you're actually buying approximately 35% of the production of it, then you listen to others. So, to answer your question a little bit more accurately, there was never really a request from either him or any of the other major distributors specifically, although Hans once said, why don't you just do something that's more vintage? Because a lot of the things that I was always doing was getting scripts in, going out on set. So, you know, we had a chance to work very closely with Arnold Schwarzenegger on TV. The Flintstones, out on the set from the Flintstones. The Shadow, out on the set with Jonathan Winters and with Alec Baldwin. I mean, all of these things around and about. Once vintage. Approached folks for Clint Eastwood and said, let's do Dirty Harry. He doesn't know Dirty Harry. And Barry had some good ideas because of his idea. What was Hans' reaction when it came out? Why are you doing the old thing? Are they doing a new movie? 9 months ago, you wanted something that was timeless, whatever. No, they're not doing a new movie. And he bought them. I mean, but it was just funny. So no, I mean, by and large, it was always directed in a certain way. Was there some conversations as to what do you guys think of this theme? Sure. Absolutely. Key distributors would come in and you talk through, you know, some of the things that you're looking at wanting to do, and you run by some things with them. So, but no, it was always us, and as I mentioned before, in terms of guild design, sometimes it was designers saying yes. I mean, Jim Patlow was a brilliant designer for a long period of time and made some great games for Bally. When we acquired Bally Midway in the summer of 1988, I mentioned before about Elvira. I went to Jim saying, hey, you know Elvira, what do you think? And I think that Jim had gotten to a point in his career after being a management guy, and had not designed a game in a long time. He wasn't comfortable. Dennis was like, I'll do it. So, I mean, there were times where there was opportunity, and times where people wanted to say, yes, I want to do this, or I don't. I mean, Dennis Norman came up with, I thought, a brilliant concept of demolition. Everything was mode-based at that point in time. I want to do something where it's all multi-balls. Really? Yeah, just jackpot stuff. Cool. All right. Let's see what demolition. We have all of these different scenarios and whatever else. I heard that working with Stallone and Snipes was going to be difficult. It wasn't. And Dennis came up with what I thought was a creative approach to kind of break the cycle that we had gotten so comfortable with. Either good, bad, or different. So, and there I am playing Mystery Castle. Wow. The ill-fated Alvin Jr. Company. What a stance. See, that's what happens when you get older and you have 2 ruptured discs in your back. Damn. Hi, am I over? Am I good? You guys want to go to bed? Oh, yeah.
There's nothing.
Hey,
There's nothing? So you have me? Oh my God, I'm sorry. Yes, please.
Roger, how you doing? Tony D.
Hi, Tony D.
First time caller, long time listener. I've been living in Chicago all my life for the past, 36 years, and then I've been out here for about 4. And Denver has a more cohesive, groovier pinball scene than Chicago does, man. What can we do to get it back to Chicago, BHQ? Second question, real quick.
Yeah.
Is concerned from everybody's perspective, we're not really talking about it, but the lack of prepared folk out there. Like,
Can I tell you? I mean, and I'll answer the question. The greatest boom right now for pinball. No, that's okay, it's late. Relax. I have a soothing voice, it's fine. Okay. The biggest problem has been, and it is a significant obstacle, in terms of Chicago, what has been a godsend is buckets. I just put a list together of 23 places in the Chicagoland area that are basically buckets. Forgetting about, well, David Buster's doesn't operate pinball, that's a whole other magnetic story. But places like Level 257, that runs Leeds, headquarters, Oregon. It's happening, and it's working. The problem is, and I don't know if the same thing holds true in Denver area, because I saw the list that I guess Holly and Dan put together all the places, and unfortunately Ellen and I will not have a chance to go around and sample. And I know the boys were out years ago at Lions, where I never been. So I know that there's some phenomenal places, and there's a great community. In Chicago, the problem is you have some people that either live in the city or out in the northern suburbs, the southern suburbs. Forget about our weather, which totally destroys anything if you want to do something in the winter and run something, and if it's going to take somebody 3 hours to get through the snow-covered roads to drive from Chicago for a pinball tournament or for a pinball league. But I think that it's growing. Now, having said that, the problem that exists, and maybe it doesn't exist here, it definitely does in Chicago. There's Jim Zespi at Logan Hardware and Logan Arcade. Does a phenomenal job. He has a crew, and he has people who can fix games. What we have lost as an industry, as a hobby, for commercial operation, is to have people who have the skills and the wherewithal to fix games. That is the one thing that is holding everything back. Because if you're walking up to a pinball machine for the first time, The game will remain nameless that I was playing with the person from the company standing next to me. And it was like, oh, what happened? And the flipper was stuck. Yeah. Let's just turn it down so that we don't burn a coil or anything else. What we used to do at the trade shows was you just open it up and you start talking vaguely to nobody about the inside of the game. And maybe, oh, here, let's show you this. But he needed somebody who had more technical expertise to fix a stuck flipper. And it was just a hassle. It was really insane. Anyway, the problem that you have, and not all the games are working. Some of them are working somewhat okay. I will comment in a negative way that how many of you are playing in the tournament? A fair number. How many are playing classics? Okay. If you play classics early in the morning, Viking played a heck of a lot better. So did Flyers. The fact that the power is such and the games have been on all day being played relentlessly means that some of the games have degraded a little. And the guys are going to have some work to do tonight when all is said and done to kind of perk them up a little bit and get ready for tomorrow. If I'm at a location and I don't have that person handy, either from a distributor or whoever, the route guy, and I'm down on Friday, what about my weekend coming up? I got a big event, I got whatever. So the obstacle that faces the industry now, which is different than it was 20 years ago, all right? And understand and appreciate something I'm going to share with everybody. We had some difficulties back in the mid to late 90s, we being Williams Valley. We had about 95% world market. There was about 2.5 million pinball machines in active operation globally. There was about 3 million video games. People were there. And earning good dollars for location owners, operators, you name it. People used to ask me, who's your biggest competitor? Premier? Indies? Our previous games. We have to do better. Look, if you're a fan of movies, and let's say that your favorite movie, I'll go back in time, just because, was Titanic, and it won an Academy Award for that year, it doesn't win it next year. Cyclone, back in '87, won 3 years in a row as the best pinball machine. Now, what does that tell you about the state of the industry back then? Oh my God, really? Adam's Family won 3 years running. I mean, here we are competing against our older games that are still earning. There's no discernible difference for the average player. Going back to your question, a license sometimes is your worst enemy. God, I remember that movie. Oh, this must be an older game. So you have some checks and balances in terms of what you want to go after. If Guardians of the Galaxy doesn't work as a second movie, you're screwed. It faltered. Sorry. I mean, fortunately, nobody did Solo with the pinball machine. Because Disney has taken a major hit on that and is going to lose over $50 million. And now we're looking at their plans going forward for the other spin-offs and the other trilogies. I mean, how thin do you spread everything? So I digress for a minute, but I guess what I'm saying to you is the emergence of barcades, which I think of as being the next singles place, all right? You're spending a lot of money for overpriced craft beers that probably are good. You get a chance to play like a 1980 Lunar Lander and other video games that have been brought to life from the garbage heap, and you have some pinball machines. And people are now being exposed to it. But if I'm going in for the first time because all my friends have talked about pinball, come on, you gotta play. God, I haven't played in forever. If that game is not functioning totally right, what happens? You're gonna look at your friend saying, seriously? It's like being told, you gotta go to this restaurant. It is the best Italian food that you'll ever have in your life. You don't know when you go there that the chef was sick that night. All you're doing is looking at your friend and saying, seriously? Really? So the problem is that the majority of 10 years for Stern was that he wasn't concentrating on the commercial market. Even though he said he was. You know, it's the bar market, it's a beer and a shot. No, the games weren't going there. They're going into people's homes. And fortunately or unfortunately, some people are able to maintain their games, or have somebody that can come in to fix them, or they don't play them often enough where you have to worry about it. So the challenge going forward for pinball to grow, whether it is here, whether it's Chicago, or any place, is how do you get skilled people to want to come in who really know their stuff? You know, it's not just a question of changing the light bulbs. You know, hey, I got to get a fixture. And then, more importantly, what's my support? Do I have to call a company somewhere and they're going to send it? Is there a local distributor or a jobber that can come? As mentioned before, Friday it's down. Hi, you know, I'll be here for 3 more hours. Have somebody come. Back in the day, we had that. And more importantly, we used to run technical schools. People like Greg McKay, Tom Cahill, Pryor back in the 70s, Bernie Powers at Ballard, were people that ran service schools. And you went in with all of your tech people, distributors, operators, to learn. Hi, I'm going to show you these things and what to do and how to do it. Look, there was a comment that's been made about Pinball 2000. All right? Being an unmitigated disaster. I will share something with you. Attack from Mars did over 11,000 games. That was more at that time than we had done with our batch of video games. And more than had emerged in the prior 3 years, because sales had dipped. Episode 1, not a favorite of mine, and there's a whole story to that anyway, but did over 7,000 machines. Not insignificant numbers. Gary would give his IT today for half of them as a production. Well, the problem back then was we were already losing people to fix games. One of the most amazing parts of the platform, and one of the major issues, how many are operators? 1. All right, so for those who don't know, one of the major problems that you have for operators and location owners is access to the game. You can't, because I got to protect the cash box. Pinball 2000, if you don't know it, had a separate key so that you could go in and fix the game and not even be able to access the cash box. Because we were sensitive to it. We understood that that was one of the barriers. And if a guy could change a light bulb or fix a stuck ball or whatever else, let him do that instead of having the game go down. So, a long-winded answer, my apologies, but hopefully it makes some sense in the scheme of things.
I can almost see, Roger, all these barcades driving need for vortex, though. Because if you've got a room full of games, even though one goes down, it's not a great loss. Sooner or later, the well-built games that you're getting, regardless of how well-intentioned Stern is trying to make games, last, because they've got to for the home market. They can't just sell a game to a guy and the guy goes, this went down, screw this system.
Right.
But all these barcade owners, sooner or later, you're going to have to find people to work on their games,
Everybody is going to.
And yeah, so.
If the desire is to get more companies, boutique or otherwise, involved in creating pinball machines.
And as a
Guess
player, I avoid places that I know games really work well.
All right, so
It'll
years
be
ago.
years until I go, oh yeah, I haven't been there forever because the games are cool.
Years ago, I was in California visiting the movie studios, and I went to Santa Monica Pier, which at one time had been a test location. And they had a line of about 15 games. And I put my money in, and fortunately I had a different shoulder bag back then, but a paper, and write down notes, turn off the game, broken flipper, bad this, or whatever, and I went down, and by about the 8th or 9th game, this gal came, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm leaving you notes because there's balls stuck in here, there's stuff in the shooter lane so that this game doesn't play, and on and on and on. Just told you, you can't do that, and the manager can't buy it. I guess for some reason he kind of knew who I was when he saw me. And it was just like, hi. What? I understand. I said, yeah, I'm going down. I left you notes for whoever your tech is to fix these. Because if you're doing like $5 a week on these, guess what? I mean, maybe you can do 30 or 50 or 100 just to make damn things work. Whether or not they ever fixed it or did it. The place that really rocked and it's no longer in existence, was Redondo Beach Fun Factory. They had an older guy there who went around, and their games were immaculate. And it was just a pleasure, you don't feel getting ripped off. So it is a challenge for the growth of pinball outside of our homes. You know, whether or not anything happens, look, you can go to college and get a degree in computer graphics, programming. You know, most MEs and EEs are not necessarily looking at carving out a career as technicians for pinball. Unless you do it on the side, or have been able to carve out a career and a life through private people, as well as companies and locations and whatever else, yeah, then you're great. But it's not as if you're going to raise your children to be a pinball mechanic. You know, I was very fortunate when I was living in New York City. I had my pinball doctors, Irving Dinnerman, who would drive in from New Jersey, and he brought this case with him. And there was stuff that I could do, but there were some other things I had no clue. And Irving would drive only for you. And we would just meticulously fix stuff. Thank God. I mean, I hate to tell you the shape of my collection at home now. And even with Josh and Zachary, in terms of some of their games and the amount of play that they get, and the fact that we all know that it needs some remedial care. Doesn't matter. And to do it smartly and wisely. So you're not going to put down water and soap to let it play field. But you're going to try to take care of things as best as you can. So, yes.
Do you think the move to service-mounted technology is going to make that problem better or worse?
I think that what Chicago Gaming tried to do with vacation, with modularity underneath the playfield, probably is something. And whether or not you wind up getting a goodie bag of stuff when you make a purchase for a game, so it's like, hi, here's the red thing, and it goes here, so if this thing falters or whatever else, I think that that becomes more of a potential solution that can work. However, I mentioned it before, unless Stern or Jersey Jack or anybody else allows somebody to open up a game and still keep the cash box separate, it doesn't matter. It's never going to happen. The other problem that I have, in all honesty, and I don't know if it affects you guys the same way it does me, but we never release games that weren't finished.
Yeah.
And, and every once in a while I hear a podcast and whatever else, and it's like, oh, it's version, 18.12. and there's another one that's coming, because they're never finished. And it's kind of like, seriously? You want me to invest X amount of thousands of dollars in my business to buy this, knowing that because of the ease of things being downloadable, which becomes a crutch, that I'm going to get this update, and then another update, and another fix. Oh, and we put in more features and new stuff. We've activated it. So it's not coming soon. It's not this. It's not. I don't understand that. And unfortunately, or maybe it's fortunately, as a community, we support it. We buy games, knowing that the games are 80%, 70%, maybe 90, maybe we can get to 95. And more importantly, there's a tolerance of some of the people internally to allow programmers and others to continue to. It's a never-ending story. The game is 5 years old, but oh wait, I got this new thing I added in, this new mode, new wizard thing, new whatever. It's like, seriously, really? So I have problems with it because I think that it takes away from the sanctity of what pinball is supposed to be, which is, here, we have slaved and we have poured our time in, and sorry, it's not ready in 6 months. It's going to be a full cycle. Look, the cycle back when was 9 months to about a year and a half. What's the urgency and hurry now to push stuff out and come back with different editions? Yeah, I see you doing this, but it's not.
What choice do you have? I mean,
well, the choice that you have is to run a business smarter and wiser so that you're not always going up against the wall and pushing stuff out and or cutting things off early because guess what? It didn't do what we thought it was and there's no demand on it.
I think that's what Bruce and Jack did better than Stern, in my opinion. He's always made a great game with Iron Maiden. I like that they do pro premium LA in some games. To me, do I think the games worth next to the game for the toys and they're in the LA? I think they should have built it this way. It should have been built that way and done. I don't mind a code update here and there, that's fine. But don't use it as a crutch like you said. But build it that way and then make the LE a true LE where we're only gonna make this 500. Period. You're only getting this art. There's no choices. This is how it is. Kind of like what Jersey Jack did with Wizard of Oz and, you know, some of the, and Hobbit, you know, and he released a done game. The playfield was the same. The rules were still the same. You just got a better art package or what have you. And so I think that's where Stern and I almost missed the mark with me for personally, like on Iron Maiden versus, you know, some of the other ones that they've done.
Well, I mean, I think that you get a little bit lazier as a company. You want to feed the beast, taking it away from Iron Maiden. And the fear is, if I'm not ready with this now, I'm going to lose that sale. We never operated that way in a marketplace that was ready and hungry for games. I mean, my God, we kept things kind of going. We cut off a lot of stuff early, so Chicago Gaming got lucky in terms of Medieval Madness and Tank for Mars. God, those were underdone.
But isn't that where licensing comes in? They have a timeline because if they're licensing it, don't they have to try to match it up with when movies are coming out and
all right,
licensing.
So you want to get into the nuances of licensing? Does anybody have a curiosity about that? All right. So the way that I have done it is you're sitting down with whoever the licensor is, all right, and you have a desire to get X. My questions are very simple. What do I get? What am I buying? Am I buying the whole car, or do I not have steering wheel? Do I get the talent, likeness rights? Do I get splits and stems, which is a way that you can wipe, clean sound effects, music, speech? Do I have access for any of the talent to come in and do custom speech? Very important. Sometimes in a movie they don't say jackpot. They don't say make the ramp. So those are things that become somewhat critical in assessing, is this worthwhile for me to actually pursue this license? I mentioned before about Batman. I couldn't get what I wanted. Fabulous movie, very successful, but it was like, no, it doesn't meet my criteria for what I can deliver back to the company. Sorry. So, yeah, it is. And really being able to offer all of the signature elements and ingredients that you would have an expectation of experiencing for a given license, whatever it might be. So, wait. So, I'll continue. So, once all of that is determined, all right, then you get into the negotiations financially. Worldwide rights, X amount of dollars up front, X amount on the back end in terms of royalties, and you work all that out, and it's within budget parameters. The other part to it is where I'm different in terms of how I do my negotiations is typically you're looking at a 3-year contract. And again, I don't think I'm telling any tales out of school. If I am, well then so be it, screw it. And you guys are going to be the wiser for it. I do 3-year deals for coin-op games. Do I start them when the contract is signed? No. What the hell? I need a cushion for development. So to your point, if I am, I'm trying to think of the right way to put it. I was going to say if I'm not wise enough, savvy enough, experienced enough, or whatever else. But that's denigrating any of the people who may be doing licensing. So I won't go on that route, but you kind of know what I'm talking about. If you're signing a 3-year deal and you signed it for, what's today, like June 8th, right? But you know the game's not going to come out until next June. We'll be generous. were it to only be that way. Your 3-year deal, I only have 2 years left. My contracts are very simple. They start, not a contract signing, payment's done, but they start with the first commercial product placement. Whether that's a home sale, whether that's on location somewhere. So I'm basically doing a 3-year contract that's probably about 4.5 years, sometimes 5. There are renewables and options that you negotiate up front, so that you don't feel compelled to be up against the wall like, oh, we only have 6 months left on the contract. What are we going to do? We got to bang these out really fast. Seriously, really? No, you don't. I mean, you want to create a relationship that is mutually beneficial to both sides. If you're going in and it's purely something that is just monetary, oh, the guys have always wanted a pinball machine, and yes, you get their music, whatever else, boom. But they really don't care. I want them to be invested in it. I want them to feel like this is something that's special. Go, do, eat, rest, sleep, enjoy. I won't keep everybody awake that much longer. So anyway, to the point of sometimes, yes, you find companies that are caught in a vicious cycle because they didn't do things the right way up front. Or, I won't say the right way. They didn't do things the way that I think that they can be done because I've done it. I've done it for 30 years. To me, it's not mystery. It's not magic. It is creating relationships where there's mutual trust and understanding of the dynamics of this particular type of category, and the fact that it's not as easy as printing out 1 million T-shirts and getting them to Walmart in time for the movie premiere.
But do people like Disney really care? And your last point is spot on. You know, Disney will make 1 million toys or 5 million T-shirts or whatever. Pinball, you're lucky if you sell a few thousand games, right? So,
So the fact is that I have something that's kind of sexy, something appealing, and something that is tactile. It's different than the app, different than the video game, different than the T-shirt, different than the toy, and it has a longer life expectancy. Plus, I can give you a variety of feedback that I can't get from a lot of these other things. Touch things, it's mechanical, this thing is moving, it's talking, music is playing. I mean, there's all these things that go around. So I understand what you're saying, and in this day and age, and even back during the heyday, it was never first play. My God, even like an NBA Jam or an NFL Blitz. Come on, I still remember Neil McCastro was the president of the company when I was negotiating for NBA Jam sites, speak about a video game, but I will. And the dollars that I was negotiating, and Neil's comment was, doesn't the NBA know that we're going to be doing a video game? And you're saying that we're going to provide them with more money than Michael Jordan gets in his contract for 1 year? Are you kidding me? I mean, there has to be an affinity for what it is that you want to carve your relationship out to be, so that it's not a toy, so that it's not a T-shirt or a hat or some other thing where, yes, it comes down to the money. And again, a lot of that is relationships. There isn't anybody I haven't worked with or I don't know, so that sometimes maybe I'm able to do things a little bit different. From a financial standpoint, where there is more care. You know, I mentioned before, I helped out with Hobbit and Pirates. Okay. I mean, truthfully, it wasn't, what I think of as being overly expensive. Nor were there constraints in regard to what you could or could not use and do. So, yeah, you have your hand up.
How does this conversation play out at the Sharpe family dinner table when you all get together now?
Do you discuss business?
I never talk business.
No. Do they?
Well, with Josh, there's a relationship that exists because of Raw Thrills. And for video games, I've done a heck of a lot of content for them, from Fast and Furious to Jurassic and Terminator. Again, video games, larger than life stuff. With Zachary now being in Stern, excuse me, we really don't talk that much.
Because he's the poor guy that has to write us the letter every month that says when these updates for the unfinished games are
Right.
coming.
Yeah, I hear you. It's a great cross to bear, but never really talked business. I mean, Ellen can even attest to the fact that I've always been very quiet about what I do and how I do what I do. Sometimes even to the point of the boys saying, "So did you do that?" Maybe. Or it's out in the field and it's like, "Yeah, I did." And then other times where it's like, "Did you do that?" I said, "No." I'll tell you right now, I did. Not, can't take credit, can't take blame. So, yeah.
You mentioned about people be available for custom speech and stuff, and it made me think some companies just get Fred to
Right.
do
The voice
the
work.
voices to fill in.
Right, so you work,
Did Williams do that, or?
you work in the contract that you can do sound waves.
Oh, okay.
So you do that. And sometimes you just do a generic narrative. So did we do that from time to time? Yeah. Where it was appropriate. But other times, no. We've got people, look, for those who saw or ever played Revolution X, another video game, featuring of all the groups, Aerosmith, those guys came in. They went in for motion capture. They went in the studio for speech. I mean, that was them performing their little tushies off because the guys put them through the ringer. So again, you need to have a partner that appreciates and understands what it is that you can bring to life. Pure and simple. And if there's hardships or if there are limitations, you as a potential licensee have to make a decision. Do I want to do this or don't I? And God forbid the decision is made, if I don't get my competitors going to, so I'm going to take it. That's not how you do business. I don't think anyway. So, all right, guys. I know that it's late. I've gone over by a half hour. I'm sorry. I guess tomorrow I won't advertise it, but you can hear me talk. God only knows about whatever. And if anybody has any questions that they want to hold until then, we can do it again. But thank you, guys. It's almost time to go to sleep. Maybe one game more. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, no, give me that look. All right, like half a dozen games more.
That's like,
my God.
That was, excuse me?
Thank God he's not my dad.
Morning, Maya.